5:30, so we will go ahead and start the study session. First up on the agenda, we have public comment period. If there's any public comment, I will invite you up to the podium. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to the roundtable discussion amongst council members. Council, do you have anything for roundtable today?
Did we pass that ordinance for the ORVs to be running around town?
That's on the agenda tonight. So we could set a public hearing, or it's on to set a public hearing and a second reading.
It's only for first reading tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Or not public comment? Roundtable? Couple things, Joel had mentioned it. Budget meetings. We have a budget meeting scheduled, and we actually have a budget meeting scheduled for Wednesday.
So I want to take 2 seconds and first apologize. I'm going to take my glasses off so it looks like I'm more empathetic with the situation, or to take the focus out of your faces. This schedule was shared with council way early this year, like in January. And then we should have kept you abreast that we're moving into the budget review process, and that we have 2 budget review meetings, one on April 13th and one on April 27th. I did not know we had one on April 13th this morning. And I texted Delora, I'm like, do you know we're supposed to have a meeting on April 13th? When I got into work and I looked at my upcoming meetings for this week, and it was on my schedule, and I'm like, son of a gun. I assume nobody on council has this in their schedule. Okay, Peter, you do? Okay, so I did share it with you. Good. That was my first concern.
I do, because I told you we needed to change either public spaces or
Yeah.
budget meeting.
And I completely forgot when Parker said public spaces next week. I'm like, yeah, sure, send that out. So is everyone able to be here Wednesday night? Wednesday night. Yeah, not Tuesday night. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, correct. So it's good to hear that some of you had it on your schedule. Again, I need to apologize that I didn't send that out with the meeting notice last week that, hey, we also have a budget schedule meeting this week. So, yeah, that's Wednesday at 5:30.
Dave, are you able to make the budget meeting on Wednesday at 5:30? Okay.
If it helps any with public spaces, Teresa, I do not yet have a quorum for that meeting. So,
Yeah. And I mean, public spaces can be in another part of City Hall during, when we're, they don't need to be in here. We will be in here. Yeah, so I just wanted to, again, apologize that I did not remind council of the upcoming budget review meetings, since I think it was January when we shared the schedule with council. I'm thankful that a lot of you put that in your calendar immediately at that time. A couple of us did not, so we're gonna have to, it wasn't just Doug, it was Jay Gibson as well. Doug first had it in his calendar, and he was very proud to let us know that he knows how to use a calendar, and he wanted to give us a demo during the department head meeting this morning. We're like, Doug, we know how to use a calendar too. Sometimes we forget. Yeah, so the way the budget meeting reviews work, because it's been a couple years since we've been able to do this smoothly, the department heads will present their individual budgets on Wednesday night. I emailed you the budget, the final document this afternoon. This is not your only time to review the budget with them, or not your only time to review the budget. We are gonna have a public hearing, I think May 9th, and then it's gonna get adopted at that second meeting in May, if everything goes smoothly. So between now and May 9th of that public hearing, so approximately, 28 days, you'll be able to go through the budget. If you have any questions, you can set up times with Tracy and I, or if you want to speak with a specific department head, you can set up a time with Tracy, the department head, and myself. Yeah, it's a balanced budget, as it has to be per our charter. Most all department heads are getting items they've requested. We didn't do any serious, like, cuts off, wish lists or the capital improvement plan. While at the same time, they were not aggressive at all in requesting stuff. So they were very, forward-thinking on what we need to do as an organization. And yeah, so I'm relieved that most of the council had it on their schedule. And I want to apologize again that I didn't get that in there. So there's two. It's April 13th and then April 27th are your two budget review times.
Both at 5:30, Joel?
Yeah, both at 5:30. You can just tell me now, and I'll remember. Ah, yeah. Yeah, Jan and I were talking about when your fishing trip is, the spring one. Yep, that's what she told me. Bill goes fishing for a weekend, and then I get to relax. Okay, that's why I wanted to talk about the budget schedule. Mayor, thank you.
Thanks, Joel. I also wanted to bring up, we've talked about having council training, and Nick Curcio can actually provide that for us, so we don't have to go through the MML. He has a baby due in May. Is that right, Joel?
Correct.
So I don't know how we want to handle that. We've got a couple options. We could try to do that at a study session or have a special meeting. Council have any preference?
Do we want this for the full council or new members that haven't received it yet?
We thought full council. Joel, do you know if Nick had a preference for date or time?
I don't think he had a preference for a date. I'm gonna try to find that email he sent me. And that might have been a phone call that I had with him, so.
Keeping in mind, we have a couple extra meetings this month. Did anyone else want to speak to a preference, or?
When did you say May?
He's got a-
Thinking is.
He's got a baby due in May, so he wanted to do that before the baby was born. In April, he was hoping, but I'm not exactly sure due date or anything like that, or what his availability is.
Okay, so I would prefer to do it either in April or not until late May or early June. My wife is due with a baby at the beginning of May. So late May sounds good, since you have a lot of meetings in April.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Did anyone have a problem with a special meeting in later May? No? No? Okay.
So would you like to do it on, Thursday night?
I'm trying to think of, I know Roger said there's a certain night of the week that works best for him. I thought it was Wednesdays, but I don't remember right off the top of my head. I'm pretty free, except for Monday nights. Anybody else have any conflicts during the week? Just Tuesdays? Okay,
Tuesdays are bad for me.
okay. Maybe try for a Wednesday if, we can check with Roger when he gets here for sure, but I thought
Sure.
there was one day that worked better for
Yep.
him.
We'd have to keep it off the second Wednesday, because I believe that's public spaces. And the fourth Wednesday is Positively Allegan, but they only meet once a quarter. They have already had their meeting this quarter, so we're good there.
Okay,
So Wednesdays would work is what I'm saying.
okay. I'll check with Roger when he gets here for sure, but
Okay.
May 25th, maybe, possibly.
tentatively. What's that, Peter?
They already had their quarterly on the third Wednesday.
May 25th would work. Because they just met last week, Positively Allegan did.
You said they do quarterly, so that would mean the fourth Friday's also, or third Friday's available, right? So 18th and 25th are both open days.
So when I meant doing quarterly, they meet once every, within that 4-month period, and they met in April. So they're not gonna meet in May.
Right, okay. Cool. Dave, did you have anything for roundtable?
Nope.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move down the agenda then to a discussion regarding the ordinance rewrite group.
All right, so we're hoping to spend some time talking about how council wants to move through this process. In my memo to council, you saw that we have approximately 300-some pages that comprise our code of ordinances are. It's divided amongst 30 chapters. I put a little table in there to list all the different chapters, and then I had a link to our code of ordinances as well. This is not our zoning ordinance, so I want to be clear on that. This is not a land use, laws. These are our administrative laws. How, the city should behave and operate is the way to look at that. This is not our charter. A charter requires a charter commission, a citizen committee to be appointed. So these are just our administrative ordinances, deal with, nuisances, blight, external stuff like traffic control, et cetera. We need to go through our code of ordinances. I mean, we have an ordinance in there saying you can't spit on the sidewalk. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I'll guarantee you, it's not being enforced. We have the rental housing program not being enforced. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but it's just not being enforced. We have, as Jay has mentioned, when he was talking about the blight stuff, the part where it says you can appeal a decision to city council, maybe it should be appealed to, staff, that kind of stuff. Some of it will be really quick. Some of it will be really long. The whole cemetery section, we'll have to, incorporate what we've been discussing at the Public Spaces Commission. So in discussing it with staff and with Nick Curcio, our recommendation is we just tackle each chapter at a time, kind of agree what the changes we want to make, go to the next one, go to the next one. I've already had Michaela download all of the chapters individually into Word documents, so we'll be able to just put them up on a screen, turn on track changes, and just go word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph through each chapter. I would recommend we address this or attack this similar to what we did with that water utility subcommittee to just, a subquorum of city council. They could come back then, discuss it as a whole at the council level. I would recommend it's something that meets weekly, so we stay on top of this. I'd recommend it's something that meets close at the beginning or at the end of the workday, so it doesn't eat into someone's, time for their full-time, their jobs you have out there. But Michaela and I would be the lead staff persons, and we'll be bringing in the department heads when the chapter addresses their specific, scope of work.
Thanks, Joel. That was kind of my thought as well, and I know we talked about that, is doing a group of 3 council members and staff that can sit down and tackle this project. Like I mentioned last meeting, Michaela and Joel both went to like an ordinance writing breakout at the MML, so got some good information from that. Mike had reached out to me on Friday and said that he is interested in sitting on that group. Is there anyone else that would be interested? I know, Peter, you always seem super well-versed in the ordinances. Bill, I know you seem to have some interest.
I wouldn't mind doing it if
I've got some interest as well.
as you know, I've got some things in the fire right now. How soon is this going to be done and started?
And that's what we'll need to decide is when we want to begin this. Did you have any thoughts, Joel?
As soon as possible is my recommendation, within the next month. I hope this doesn't become something that we have on a study session and a couple of side conversations, and 6 months from now, we're like, are we ever gonna get this going? But we've talked about doing something like this for about 9 months now, off and on. No real commitments. I'd like to make a commitment and move down the aisle with this one.
So I've got some interest in sitting on that as well, but if, we can't have a quorum, so we can only have 3 or less involved.
I'd be willing to sit on it. One question I have is, as we go through these chapters, are we gonna bring back each chapter as we complete it to go through the reading and the approval of it, so.
So our plan would be, we would bring each chapter back as as that committee completes a chapter, we bring it back into a study session. And there's a good dialogue on why did you make this change, make that change, so the whole council can then have their, hands in that process. But we won't go through the first reading, second reading, until the very end. And that was I believe that's the recommendation that we had from Nick Curcio as well. And that's something that the small group can discuss at the beginning.
So council will have a chance to look at it and then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And I want to be clear, my vision is it comes back during a study session. So council has the whole time to just really talk about how did you get here? Why did you pull this out, not pull that, put this in, add to it as well. And like I said, we'll do track changes, so we'll be able to, follow that work pretty easily. Did we put a sign on that door? Okay. That one door has a broken lock mechanism where it's locked continuously and we have to order a part to fix it.
Peter, did that answer your question then?
Yeah, that
Okay.
that's my question. I was just seeing if we're gonna approve them as we go, or at least keep updates to council and then approve as one ordinance
Yeah.
change. Because I know we have to come back for approval, so.
Yep, and you are correct. It's a first reading and a second reading, so.
Are there other council members that would be interested in being on that? If so, we'll need to do either like a name draw or something.
I've got plenty on my plate, so I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good too.
I'm interested, but
I'm interested too, but I'm not, I don't, at this point, I just don't know what things are gonna be like.
you could be like
Until I get
all
this
over
other
the
stuff
place,
done.
Bill.
Or does it have to be just one group for the whole thing, or chapter by chapter, can we have somebody jump in and out?
I would probably say the same group, but that would just be my thought, but
For the ease of staff, we would like to have one group we're working with. However, fully understand, there might be something that, excites Bill, and Bill would like to be in that meeting for that one. And one of you can tag out, like tag team wrestling, if needed. But for the ease of staff, we'd like to have a committee established that we're working with, instead of every chapter picking a new three. Because I really don't even know what, I think, I know what all those are. It's advertising, that's a goofy one. It'll be interesting to see how many people want to get excited about, handbills on windshields and that regulation.
Teresa, do you have interest? I know that you've brought up ordinance review multiple times as well.
I would just assume somebody else can do it if they want. I mean, I was part of the WISC group and if somebody else wants to do it, I'm fine, just looking at them afterwards.
Bill,
Looks like us.
I'll defer to you. Yeah, if,
I'm fine with doing, like Teresa just said, I trust Peter, he likes to study things and do things and gives Joel, he keeps him, dots his i's and crosses his t's. And the same with you, Dolores, so
Yeah,
I have
that's-
no problem, that, I would just, as soon as, stand back in the background and say yea or nay or whatever.
We'd
Okay.
rather complain afterwards.
I can't complain if I'm not in there.
does that change your mind?
Can't. So what we'll do is
Okay.
Michaela will email the three of you, Councilmember Zeter, Hans, and Mayor Andrus, to set up some times and dates that work, see what works best for everyone.
Okay,
All right?
sounds good.
Thank you, guys.
You guys okay with that then? Okay, perfect. Anything else on the ordinance rewrite group? I'm actually very excited that this is moving forward.
Me too.
I too.
Yeah. Next, we have a discussion regarding the City of Allegan park usage fees.
Another exciting subject.
Okay, so we want to spend some time just talking about how we reserve parks. I know council has spent a lot of time talking amongst yourselves about policies for reducing fees, policies for, what the fees should be. Long story short, that has just been a fun process for staff to watch from a distance. So what we did is middle of last week, for some reason, we just had a powwow, and we said, we should just make this really simple. Parker looked at the city of Grand Rapids. They have a low entry to reserving their parks, and we don't know why we don't have just a low entry for reserving our parks. And so we said, what if we just said, the gazebos and the picnic shelters, which is what people really reserve, whether it's at the sports complex or J.C.'s, it's $20 for 4 hours. And if you want to do 8 hours, it's $40. And just, that is what the fee schedule is. And if someone wants to, request a waiver of a $20 fee for 4 hours, then they can come to city council and make that plea, because everybody has the right to petition their government in the United States of America. And we're not going to deny someone that right to petition government. Or at least I'm not going to deny someone that right to petition their government. But 20 is in my opinion, a low entry. And we are keeping the one policy, if you are on the riverfront stage, it is a musical performance and it's family friendly. I mean, that is the reason that riverfront stage was built, was for musical performances. So if you want to have a rally or a TED Talk or a gathering, Mayhem Gazebo is perfect for that. Hanson Park is perfect. The picnic shelter down at the JC Park or at the sports complex, those are perfect for, rallies and gatherings and, talks and all that stuff. If you're gonna be on the riverfront stage, have some amps out, play some music. Make it family friendly for people. And that includes weddings. We talked about, should someone be able to have a wedding on the riverfront stage? And I just said, no, let's just keep that music. Let's not try to cloud the waters too much. If they want to get married, Mayhem Park is beautiful for a wedding. So this is not us really trying to force feed council into a decision. We had a powwow because we know you've been discussing it, and we really have not given council probably, more options or better guidance. So this is just, we think this satisfies, or this answers a lot of the issues or discussions we've been having. When our prices were a little higher and we're trying to control, the kinds of things that happen by doing this price thing, so. It's up for, discussion at council. We have to address it one way or another. So,
Thank you, staff.
and by staff, I mean Parker Johnson was the one that came to my office and said, what if?
Thank you, Parker Johnson.
We knew that.
I just kind of went through these and had a couple notes. First thing is, on the new form, we don't have any like road or sidewalk rental. Are we not going to let anybody like block off?
So we thought one way to clear up the water is to make this form just about the parks.
Okay,
And we need to talk about the road closures. So we added road closures and that $25 fee to the current form that's there right now, because we've had a couple people request to close off roads. One that, I believe it was last year, Kara and Mike Jones, they own Minnie's Restaurant in Allegan Taxi. They want to do a car show. We let them close off Trowbridge. Staff did get blowback from 2 business owners when they wanted to do it again. Like, that's great, but what if we put you over on Water Street? And before Trowbridge, I think they did the parking lot, the county parking lot. And I know the counties reached out to me and said, hey, they've had some concerns because they didn't realize people would be drinking over there. And I'm like, well, that's your property, not my property. But we put them over on Water Street, which we thought was a good, mutual, beneficial decision. And we got blowback by putting them on Water Street. And so I think we have to we're going to have to talk about how do people get to close off a street. The Eagles, we closed off a street for Mitch Wooster's memorial service because we knew it was going to be a big turnout. So when I say we, it's just because I'm a member there. We paid the $25 fee. We closed off, Chestnut Street. It was a Sunday afternoon. Really no harm. I mean, there's 100-some people that were sitting in tents out there, remembering a good friend. There's no harm in the closing off Trowbridge for a car show. It's going to happen again in 2 weeks, I signed off on that, through our current process. Do we get into this thing where people want to close off Locust every single week? I'm not sure if that's a big thing. Do we let people close off streets like when the city tried to do a car show for Bridge Fest 3 years ago, and we had 4 cars show up? And all Brady was closed down, and it's just looks vacant. I don't know if that's a good look either. So, we're gonna have to talk about people close, I mean, to me, I don't know why we're making people pay fees to close off streets. I mean, we have to drop off a couple barricades. But I would like to make that a separate kind of form. Runs and walks. Most of the walks happen on sidewalks. You have a right to occupy a public space like that. You're not impeding traffic, so.
So that kind of goes into my roadblocks and barricades, because that was in like the old version as well. So you're suggesting that that information may be handled separately, perhaps
Yeah.
through DPW, like they have to contact DPW to do that, or like
Yeah.
how, so this is just our park facilities?
One way to make this, to clear the water more is just make this about parks. But we are gonna talk about, renting out, the site, what we call the crowd control panels, the metal bike rack looking fence things. We do rent those. That's in our fee schedule, I believe. You pay a deposit and people do rent them. I mean, during the COVID, I don't know the words I'm looking for, but when COVID was happening, the restaurants had to have outside seating. We let Tantric rent them to put them around the outside. We gave them to Sherwood's Cove so they could create an outside area, for the businesses that don't have an outside deck. We even gave them to Schaendorf. We gave the fire pits to Schaendorf so they could have an outside area as well.
So electricity, because that was one of the things we talked about with like direct costs.
The $20 for the reservation for electricity, and Dave, Councilmember Redding wants to speak in a second. I think the $20 is inclusive
that.
of that.
Okay.
That's so minuscule, and not letting people plug in is just weird, in my opinion. I don't think we need to get that controlling.
So that was, my last question was just if the fee is so low, then do we want to have a fee reduction policy at all? And that,
I would recommend not for your parks. We're gonna talk about the Griswold separately, the Regent Theater separately, because that's more intensive. But for someone reserving the picnic shelter at J.C. Park for their son's 15th or 5-year-old birthday party, I don't think we need to go, $20 for 4 hours, I think is an easy thing.
go ahead, Teresa. Or Dave, did you have something?
Well, on
Yeah,
the,
that's it.
2 things. The first is on the road closure. Do we have like a process for notifying businesses that are on that street or residents that are on that street that, hey, we're planning to close this off?
I would say our process is informal, but we do go tell the businesses when something's happening.
Okay.
We do make a good faith effort to reach out to each business, but it's an informal kind of reach out. I know my first year here, when the owner of Sassy Olive was at that small corner building, 10 whatever, Locust Street, where the current fundraiser people are located across from Aubrey's Closet. She had a Sunday sale, and she worked directly with the police department to close off the street. And I was still living in Holland, because that was the first spring I was, hired. I was here for like 3 months. And my phone started ringing in Holland saying, why did you close down Locust Street? Who do you think you are? And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And I hopped in my truck, drove down here, and there was like, I would exaggerate. There are lines around the corner going onto Hubbard for people trying to get in, and then lines going down Locust Street onto Trowbridge around creative events, waiting to get into that area. And that's why the police said, we're gonna close this street off, because it was just so many people. They were overflowing. It was a traffic safety thing.
Sure.
We need a better process on how we let, when we approve something, how we go notify all the businesses.
Okay.
And some business, they have different hours, so sometimes we don't always capture the business when they're there,
Yeah.
but.
And then I guess my other question is for the park reservation, I guess I don't know how to word this. What exactly are people getting out of this? Because they can use the park anytime. So is this like, you pay $20 so you can tell people not to come in there, or?
Yeah, so the current practice right now, probably one of the more popular ones, outside Good Times at the Gazebo, is Mayhem Park for weddings. People reserve that because that is where they're being married. One of my kids' good friends from Holland came down to Allegan, Michigan to get married at Mayhem Park Gazebo with no ties to the city of Allegan whatsoever. They just were driving around West Michigan and they said, that looks like the place that's nice to be married at. Weird to me, but I mean, high five to them. And high five to Allegan that you have a place where someone just driving through West Michigan that caught their eye.
So then they would have, when they do that reservation, they would have an expectation that there's some sort of like, I can tell people they can't be here, or?
Yeah, so they get a copy of the form.
Okay.
And that is with our signatures. It's my signature, the promotions department signature, which is typically Parker or Tammy Gorby, DPW, which is Doug Hosman, and the police chief. All four of us look at it, sign off, and say, yeah, this works.
Okay.
And one reason all four sign off on it is we know other things that might be going on, and it might conflict with something else.
Teresa, did you have something?
My question was kind of on the, hitching on to that was, if we put up anything saying this is reserved or anything.
So
If
down
that-
at Mayhem Park Gazebo, there used to be a wood sign that would say reserved. In my time here, I don't ever remember Aaron Haskin, the previous DPW director, Jeff Morey, the assistant DPW director, or even Doug, since you've been here, saying, when we've approved a reservation there, that, oh, we have to go hang that sign. And it doesn't say reserved for, what's going on. It's just a wood sign that says reserved. And I mean, and sometimes that sign was up all the time. I've seen it just like dangling in the wind. But it's a city park, and if nothing's going on, you should be allowed to go hang out in that gazebo and hang out with your buddies and talk about life. Or sit on one of those stepped stoops and read a book and watch a sunset.
Okay. Just was curious.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I was just wondering if, I know at the county parks, when you reserve a county park, they will go out and say reserved for the Jones family or whatever, so.
And if we have a place to put that, then there's a way, I mean, we have a laminator machine here at City Hall.
If there's not been an issue in the past, then.
There hasn't been yet.
You know,
On one Friday night, we watched someone get married on the riverfront stage, and that party literally ran down to the stage. It was like they knew they weren't supposed to be doing it, but they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this anyways. And their service about 4 minutes happened as I was standing by the fireplace going, hey,
No, they can do it technically. It's just-
yeah.
Nobody's
I mean, you can't stop something like that. It's public space.
I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking, like, okay, so why would somebody come reserve it? It seems like the reason you would reserve it is so you can say, hey, this is exclusive
Yeah.
here, this is no longer.
You want to avoid potential conflict, I would say.
Sure.
Yeah, like for an example, I have someone who's requesting a wedding at Mayhem Park on April 29th. But if they don't reserve it and we get down there and someone's in there, I mean, we could kindly ask them if they could please move. So we could have the wedding, but otherwise it's already in use and we're gonna have to find somewhere else to be. So I was going to explain that to them.
I think
my
the big
further
ones,
communication.
probably like pavilions, if you're having a big family gathering or a big picnic at J.C. Park, you want to reserve it so that you know you're going to have tables and you're going to have the use of that facility. You don't have to have people like staking it out all day, and, it's to try to avoid the conflict and just say, hey, it's reserved. And
As I've shared with some of you, I think, in my previous city I worked for, they did not have a reservation. It was first come, first serve. So in downtown Holland, there's a park called Centennial Park across from City Hall. Saturday mornings at 6 o'clock, the families and the groomsmen and the bridesmaids showed up. And they claimed one of the, what we refer to as triangles in that park. And they had chairs, they were setting chairs up right away, and someone stayed there the whole time. No, you can't walk through here. Oh, college kids, you can't come play Frisbee here. You can't tie the bungee cords between two trees and jump and do flips.
And Peter, I know you mentioned frequently, like, well, you could just go down there and see and get the gazebo, but, I mean, I'm fine with it. If it's $20 for 4 hours and we just don't have a fee waiver, if somebody wants to come forward, I guess, then, but that, we still would have that, what we were trying to kind of avoid with,
Well, and at that point, I think if we say no enough times, nobody's gonna ask.
The one thing I see in this form that I would like to see probably put onto it is, one, probably the park rules. Two, something to the effect of you should clean up after yourself and don't leave it, things in the receptacles properly. And three, probably a contact number for if there's an issue. Don't try to deal with it yourself. You can contact, whether it's chief of police or somebody to say, hey, if there's some issue going on with this reservation, just contact the city about it, and here's the person that you should contact.
We will, I mean, immediately up when you mention that, I go to like just a non-emergency 911 number and say, we need a peace officer out here.
Pretty much.
I'll talk to the chief of police. I mean, I'll be clear, on a Saturday, I don't want my number or Parker's number or Tammy Gorby's number to be the one that we get called on.
That's fine.
Because we can't, I mean, we might be out of town, but we could probably do like a the non-emergency number for that one. Yeah, the other stuff, park rules, is good. The one thing we're gonna have to work on with Doug and I is we're gonna have to reach out to, the youth baseball, because they have, during the summer months, they get the picnic shelter, because that's where their storage is. But at the same time, I think the public should be able to rent the picnic shelter. And then youth baseball just needs to know, hey, we'll communicate, there's a birthday party going on this Saturday, you know.
You're talking out at the sports
Well,
complex?
yeah, the sports complex. Because that is an item, that's just some communication that we need to have with that group.
Is there a need for a storage shed near the baseball fields to store the items in, like the bases and all that?
That's
And
all,
bats?
that's all in the storage shed that is incorporated into the picnic shelter. Yeah, so the picnic shelter, one end of it is a concrete, right? Concrete block. It's a storage shed.
So they're not like using the picnic area, they're just using the storage shed?
Yeah.
And I don't think any public really wants to use the storage shed.
No, they don't want to use the storage shed, but I don't want them, doing, hey, we're gonna do a clean out on Saturday, June 24th. And someone thinks they're gonna have a birthday party for the kid that same day.
Okay.
I'm trying to reduce the conflict is what I'm trying to do there.
so council, would you still want to have any sort of a waiver for the Regent and Griswold? Because that's
That's,
still a bit more,
I still think
the
that's a
heavier
topic.
lift is still thinks it's a topic, or, okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with like reducing the fees down to this, because I always thought our rental fees were quite exorbitant compared to like Plainwell and some of the others for renting just a gazebo or just reserving it. It always seemed like that was a high fee, and I'm fine with reducing that, avoid having any of that issues. And then, of course, Griswold and others, we have to address, because we want, increased usage there, so sometimes we may have to take a reduced fee to see an increased usage or more public events happening, or work some other type of deal with somebody that wants to use it.
Okay, I had made those couple changes to that reduction policy. And added, I saw on here that like City of Allegan and APS are free of charge, so I'd added that on here. I guess I can just try to tweak it and just have it be for the Griswold and the Regent, rather than all public spaces.
Joel, didn't you share like a couple meetings ago that there were some nonprofits that staff had waived the fees for?
Yeah, so, Red Cross, when they sold their building on Hubbard near M89, M40, they got use of our Griswold Auditorium for free for the blood drives.
Like as an agreement for?
The way it was explained to me, it was an agreement, but I haven't really seen an agreement, but they are in there. Does MAD pay?
They do.
Ma-
A reduced fee.
Yeah, so Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they have public education series for violators of drunk driving laws. They go there and have to go through their, what I'm gonna call court-appointed, counseling class sessions. They get a reduced fee to be in there. There's a pickleball group that we allow the pickleball group to go in there during the daytime and on Saturdays. That goes to city council's goal of increasing adult recreation. So we've been flexible with them.
But they
Cardio
have-
drumming in the wintertime.
But pickleball is usually give us a donation at
Yeah,
the season.
correct. Mike Buck, and I'm sure he passes a hat, gives us it's been like around $500 each year they donate to the city as a way of saying thank you. And that would still be a reduced fee for the hall or the reception area, the banquet room. Cardio drumming in the wintertime, they go down there and they do cardio drumming once a week in the basement. And in the summertime, I think they do it out on the riverfront. But it's just a park, it's a group showing up, they don't reserve it, they don't kick people out, they're like, hey, welcome, kind of a thing.
Does the pickleball court get reserved over?
No, the pickleball court off Marshall,
Yeah,
that's a first come, first serve.
okay.
And if you see people playing pickleball, pickleball people always want new pickleball players. They will absorb you and let you play with them and bring you in and,
I see them there all the time. I've never played, but it must be something.
it is fun. I have played. I've got a few paddles and a couple wiffle balls.
Okay, so the other thing was, I know the county, of course, already has an agreement. Now, I saw on this new form, of course, the city and the public schools may utilize facilities free of cost. Should we note there that they still should reserve it so that we're not like surprised when somebody reserves it and, hey, we should at least tell them, yeah, you can use it free of cost, but you still just gotta fill out the thing so we know the schedule, so we don't double book it. So that they don't get the idea that we can just show up and use it and it's ours. The same for, of course, the Griswold and the like, just so that we have a good schedule, so we
Yeah,
don't double book or have conflicts.
No, that's something I would like us to, as we talk about, utilizing the Griswold more and, through the asset, I had another gentleman who came and asked if he could get a key so he could start his own pickleball group. And I said, I hear what you're saying, but we really are going, with these times right now, and these are the people you should call and find out when they are actually playing and show up when they're playing. So, we probably should get a more set schedule. So when people call and ask, we aren't double booking, stuff like that. We do tell the pickleball people and the cardio drumming, something's going on and obviously you can't, use the Griswold if there's a reception going on in the basement, stuff like that.
Doesn't Tammy take care of the Griswold?
So Ryan Berza is our Griswold Theater manager. Tammy was doing all the reservations. She now is primarily a front desk cashier. But
So nobody oversees all the reservations over there?
Ryan Berza does.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So can he organize that as
Yeah.
we get applications?
Yep, very much so.
Okay. Okay.
I would probably just suggest a new shared Outlook calendar or something that they get put on, so.
Yep, and
all
we,
of us
we,
can see it.
yeah, that's what we have going on right now for all the reservations. I think what we need to do is get the pickleball, find out when their set times are and get them on that calendar. Because it is kind of,
Oh, they just come and,
I've gotten a
Go
text
whenever.
message one night at like 7:45 that said, anybody want to play pickleball? And I'm like, I've yet responded yes. I'm not sure why I'm still on your text group messages, but yeah, it's that kind of a thing.
oh, okay.
It is really a little impromptu.
We did table the request from Kalamazoo Folklife for what do we say, June? A meeting in June for their request to waive Mayhem Park fees. Are we going to still allow waivers of these fees? I mean, obviously they can petition, but I feel like we're still gonna get into that. Just kind of arbitrary decision-making of,
Rule for how far out you can reserve it then?
The motion, we reserved it for next year's, the Saturdays, but then we tabled the request to waive the fee, I believe.
There's no written rule, council members either, but past practice has been, when we've had other requests, it wasn't from the Kalamazoo Folk Life Organization to book something out more than a year in advance, and at that time, staff had told them no earlier than a year in advance, so it's just kind of rule of thumb, I think. And
I think you'll still get the request for waivers, but with the fee where it's at, I think you'll get a whole lot less of them. Cause they'll just say, I'll just pay the $20, who cares? Then to deal with, now I gotta come into council, I gotta write a letter, I gotta do all this. You're just gonna say, $20, pass the hat, not a big deal. So that's part of lowering it down, I think, to this level is, we're not gonna have it necessarily for the parks. We're still gonna have, of course, the issue with other facilities, because their fees are not gonna get reduced to $20 to rent the Griswold.
But then we still gotta remember that we shouldn't waive it for some things and not for other things. That's, well, I know that's where Delora was going with this, that, you know, at $20, do we even, as a group, we need to decide, are we not gonna waive that?
Well, we waive it for the city, we waive it for Positively Allegan, we waive it for the high school, we waive it for the county. I will still listen to requests to waive it, if, especially if it's a public event. It's not like you're having a private party. If you're having a private party, I might just say, hey, it's a private party. $20 to reserve it, that's the cost of it. But if you're actually doing something for a community, and it's not just, I'm gonna go have a party here, and that's the difference for me, is if it's a public event meant to everybody in the public to come and enjoy, I really have no issue on waiving it at that point still.
This might be a tricky question to answer, but I'm curious, if we could tell people why we charge $20. You know what I mean? Like, what is the $20? Where does it go? What does it pay for?
It's basically just to reserve it. I mean,
Just to have a fee on there and just picked 20, just because it's a low number?
Yeah, I mean, if we need to come justification for $20, we need a reservation process because we want to avoid conflict, is the first step. To have a reservation process is we have to have staff process paperwork. Average staff member, you know, that processes this paperwork, when you include their benefits, their retirement contribution, et cetera, is probably around $30 to $40 per hour. They don't make that, you know, that's not what their hour rate is, but when you add all that stuff together, you know, $20 of that, you know, you're gonna fill out the form, you're gonna give it to staff, staff has to go check with the DPW, the police chief, you know, the promotions department and the city manager, you know, make sure all the i's are dotted, t's are crossed on that. And then, you know, we can back into that. I mean, I'm backing into a number, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's where you could go. The more harsh one was, why are we charging someone, you know, $100 for 4 hours?
Right.
And I'm like, that's kind of a stretch. And the other thing is, you know, we want to make this low entry. And someone can say, well, 1 penny is low entry. But then it's not worth the effort that staff's putting into the reservation process and, you know, that work.
Yeah. I'm just putting myself in the position if somebody comes here and says, hey, I want to waive this $20 fee. Why do you have this $20 fee? It'd be good to have like a standard kind of like, well, it's staff time, it's a processing fee. I think that would help.
I think part of it is also if you go to like zero fee, then you have the issue of people just making reservations and never showing up, and
That's where I was gonna go next, Peter. is if
That's
do we
usually
even
why
have
some
a
people
fee?
have it,
Do
is
we
it's
just
just-
have a reservation form and not even charge a fee then?
yeah, that's mostly where a lot of cities still have a fee, even if it's a very low fee or they waive it a lot, is they want to ensure that people actually show up and use it when they say they're going to do it, so that, especially if you put out reserve signs. Now, if they don't show up to the gazebo, it's not going to really make a difference. People will just use it, I guess, because we're not actually cordoning anything off. So it's not a humongous deal in this situation, but some areas actually put reserved, and then that keeps that, like the county puts the reserve sign up and kind of keeps people out of that gazebo or pavilion, And if they don't show up, it's kind of like, the other public didn't get to use it either, and now it's just sat there. I don't know.
So what's the consensus, council? We like this new form? Direction for staff to go in?
I think it's good.
Thumbs up? Good? Down here?
With just the add of the rules and, general courtesy to clean up after yourself type thing, just.
Yeah, we have like that was one of my notes.
Is this gonna be a non-refundable fee?
Yep.
Just, it can be even a sheet, just that here's the park rules, and we appreciate you to clean up after yourself. It really helps. I just don't want somebody to think I reserved it and I can just leave a mess out on all the picnic tables and not clean up.
Yeah, because right now we have like it comes with information about all the parks, and so that stuff would all still be kind of attached to the application. Is that the intention? Okay.
Yeah, there's a second page on this proposed one that would just be the backside that's got all the facility details.
Okay, yeah, so that would be pretty easy just to add those couple things too. Cool. All right, if there's nothing else on that, we'll go ahead and move down to the OPRA policy. Joel?
All right. This might be re-education for some of you. So we want to spend some time talking about the obsolete property rehabilitation tax incentives, or Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, as the state of Michigan calls it. OPRA's, their purpose are tax incentives for people to redevelop contaminated, blighted, or functionally obsolete buildings. And it's to rehab them into commercial or mixed-use projects. So this isn't for residential unless it's mixed use, where it's commercial on one floor and residential on another floor. This isn't for industrial, so it's really like your downtown, kind of stuff. The incentive, just freezes the property taxes for, freezes their existing taxable value for up to 12 years. Right now, we have 9 OPRAs in the city. We started OPRAs when I came here in 2017. The reason we started OPRAs was, first, the state of Michigan, whenever you apply to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for a grant to improve a building, the local unit of government has to commit some kind of funding. We've done that in the past with our facade reimbursement program. We've also done it through the approval of OPRAs. As you can see up there, we have 9 properties that have gone through this so far. Of the 9 properties, 4 of them have not made any progress on their project, even though they've had this tax incentive. We really don't have a policy established that says, hey, we can pull the OPRA if you don't do X. So when you go to the next slide, these are some questions I think we need to talk about as council. First it says 12-month, I should say 12-year, I apologize. Is a 12-year OPRA still necessary? You can go anywhere from 6 to 12 years. We were doing 12 years because when I first came here, there were still quite a few vacant buildings in the downtown. I mean, the J.C. Penney building was still vacant. This building, Allegan APO, it was in the process of being vacant. So we went ahead and, it was always, we approved a 12-year. If a property owner doesn't move forward with their building project, should they continue to receive an OPRA? Should there be a time frame that says, once you're approved for the OPRA, you have 12 months to get your project going. If it's not going within 12 months, we're gonna take the OPRA back. And then, the bigger question is, should we continue to offer OPRAs? Or should we find another way to, financially contribute to projects that are receiving state funding?
Joel, what would be another option as far as, like, to financially contribute?
Direct cash. So, like when we did our facade reimbursement program, Lumberman Lofts, that program was still in existence when they did that, so they received like just under 30,000, I believe. 136 Brady received, I think, around 13,000 through the facade. They were the last two to receive the facade improvement in the downtown, because we wanted to allocate the money to other projects in the downtown and also just start saving up for our streetscape project. That would be an option. You know, personally, I'm not against OPRAs or tax incentives. You know, if they don't make the improvements, the tax isn't gonna grow anyways, so it's not like we're losing something. But if they make the improvements and you get a really cool project like Lumberman Lofts, that loss in that tax growth we get for the first, 6 years, that one was 12. I wonder if that's negligible to all the coolness that happened because they made that, that project happen.
So, my view on it is, answer to number one is I think it should probably be a 6-year term is kind of our standard, and we'll offer a 12-year if they justify it. Scope of project, et cetera, that this is a very large project. If the property owner doesn't move forward, I say, yeah, we should be able to revoke it. And I would say that would probably be about a 2-year period. Going along with question 3 is you got 12 months to start the project, and you can ask for one 12-month extension. And if it isn't going by then, we can pull it back. And I think we should offer OPRAs because I'd rather do that than direct tax money going into it, direct general fund money going towards their project, because all we're losing is the tax increase. We're not putting any direct money into it, so if nobody ever decided to develop it, it would just sit there and be pretty much at the same value, and if anything, go down because the building would lose its, what do they call it again? It's certain level, the percentage of the building. So I'm fine with OPRAs. We do have to address though, like, what our policy is, and I'm fine with addressing it to just say, you got 12 months to start your project. You can ask for a 12-month extension, and after that, city council can yank it back. And I always want it more of a 6-year OPRA with the person coming in to really justify why we should give them a 12-year.
Thanks, Peter. I'm pretty much in agreement with everything you said there. I have no problem with OPRAs. I think 12 years is too long to offer them. I think a 6-year is pretty generous. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts? Mike?
10 years is the com that we've seen in other municipalities, so.
David Bell, do you have any thoughts?
I'm for the OPRAs. It's money the city is giving, but we aren't giving any money. That's the thing that I like about them. I agree with Peter. I think 12 years is too long. I think 10 years is too long. I think 8. If I like the idea with Peter is give them 6, and if they have reason to have it longer, if it's a big, huge project, give them an extension, give them 8 years. I just think, something can get torn down big time in 12 years. And these other things need to be addressed.
Yeah, yanking it is interesting because like you said, if they're not making any improvements, then the taxable value of that property is not going up anyway. But this is an incentive to do that work, and if you're not gonna do that work, then why
Technically-
offer them?
Technically, it might actually be going down,
Yeah.
because if they don't do the improvements, they're at a higher tax rate. They could justify going down and say, hey, we went halfway through the project and we have a half-built building now, and it's really not worth what we started at. And it could lose value.
Isn't the real incentive here the MEDC funding though? Like, we're just using the OPRA instead of putting our own money in, and it's lower risk, because if we put our own money in, then they don't do anything, then we're out that money, but if they don't do anything with the OPRA, then, am I understanding correctly?
So,
They get reassessed after their improvements.
So,
Have less tax money that they,
Yeah, but I'm saying like the MEDC funding is the real incentive to do this. If we just did an OPRA, like, hey, you can improve it and you don't have to pay any more taxes, that's
Yeah.
less of an incentive.
not every OPRA has received MDC funding.
Oh,
But yeah, but I would say the primary funding for the big projects that we've seen was funding they got from the MEDC. 136 Brady chose not to receive any funding from the MEDC because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. 701 Marshall Street, Robinson Manor, they also did not receive any state funding for the rehab that they did there on their first floor, and now they're moving on to the second floor. Shane Dorf's did not receive any MEDC money. Now, the previous owner, Red Tail, or the previous occupant, Red Tail 412, they received like $60,000 from the city for facade improvements. They received I'm sorry, this just seems like a lot to me to give one building owner downtown. So yeah, Dave, I think you're correct. The primary, or the primary incentive is the MEDC money, and the OPRA is just kind of like an appendage tacked onto it. But there are some projects that are going forward that, you know, got the OPRAs that didn't get any MEDC money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm, again, trying to understand, it's not that we're like losing our shirts on these OPRAs, we're not like, oh, we're losing so much money. It's more that the projects aren't moving forward is our concern,
Yeah.
right?
There are a few that aren't moving forward. I would say I would agree, we're not losing our shirts, but this is a very complicated assessment process where our current assessor is just like, why do you guys have so many OPRAs? I'm like, because it works for us. He goes, I know, Joel, but man, you know, Lindsay's boss, who knows me, we have conversations like that. He goes, there's 3 separate tax bills that have to go out for the OPRA. I'm like, I know. I go, but it works. And, you know, the people that have moved forward with them, like Michelle Mearsma at 118 Locust, Ben Otis, or One Enterprise, Ben Otis at 136 Brady, they love the idea of the OPRA. Now, you recall, Katie Lake did not appreciate the OPRA, and she rescinded hers, you know, last year at 155 Brady, but she wasn't moving forward with the second floor rehab either. So one thing I just want to comment on before I lose that train of thought is I heard like a range of years. Staff can go back and work on a policy, because there's no policy. There's nothing to guide council on how you make decisions. And you're going to have another one coming up on the Iron Bridge within probably a month. There's a big project that's moving into the Iron Bridge sports bar. So that person is going to be coming to the council with their plan, and they're working with the state on funding, and they've already submitted their OPRA application to me. And I'm like, okay, but before we move forward with your application, I need to let council have a discussion about this. So you get to have a policy that has a base, 6 years. And if someone wants more, they're gonna have to do things that meet council's goals. So if a goal of yours is affordable housing, then, show us how your project's gonna do affordable housing. Your strategic planning, you guys talked about wanting to be more green. You want another year added to your OPRA? Show us what kind of green building technologies you're putting into your building. If you want to go down that path. Because I heard some, different years. It wasn't just all 6 is fine, 6 is the most. We did that in my previous role for neighborhood enterprise zones where, they got a base 6. All the state programs are 6 to 12 years, IFTs, NEZs, OPRAs. Base was 6, and if you did this, you got a little bit more. If you did this, you got a little bit more. And we can develop something for council on a policy basis like that for you to look at and you can, chew on, and because we probably won't bring the Iron Bridge Sports Bar OPRA to you till later on this summer, because they just have to get their project with the state at a further level before I'm willing to commit or bring forth a tax incentive. I want to make sure it's a real project, not a good project on paper, which is where it is right now. What I'm hearing is the majority of council wants to keep with OPRAs. Majority of council wants to see a shortened time frame, but seeing heads nod when I just spoke about, some one-ups, you might want to see what that looks like. And we would just go off, based off your last couple of years, goals and stuff like that, and what we've heard in conversations with you over the past year, and then you guys can massage that at your next study session.
Did Joel kind of meet what everyone was thinking with that summation?
I like the ideas with the incentives, Joel, to increase the OPRAs then. That's a good idea.
Yeah, to keep them going, to add, okay, you did that, so now we'll give you another year if you
Yep.
need it, and, because otherwise, if you just cut them off at 6, well, I'm not gonna do any more then,
Yeah, I think that the
or
hardest.
telling what it's gonna be left at.
I think the hardest part for me is judging, like, how do I measure, like, what an appropriate time frame is? I mean, I'm not a developer, I don't know what's good or what works for me, yeah, so I'd be open to other ideas about that.
Joel, what do you think about Peter's statement about the year and then an extension for a year? Is that doable for
Oh, yeah,
development
no,
stuff? Like,
You're being very forgiving and decent. We're allowing people to come in and do an extension, because they might run into a snag. There could be a supply chain issue, like, hey, we really wanted to get this started, but we're replacing all of our floor joists with steel beams in the basement, and steel is 9 months out. And so we can't get the steel beams in. Those kind of things would be reasonable to say, okay, we're gonna give you, a 12-month extension if they're getting to that point. My concern is 217 Hubbard. That was the first OPRA granted. It was gonna be a restaurant. It was gutted, and it has stayed gutted since, 2017. So that's the one that is really, or the ones that we gave for second floor rehabs that never got off the ball. So with those right now, since we didn't have that policy in place, what I'd like to do is reach out to them and say, hey, we're kicking around a policy. You're gonna have 12 months to start showing some action, or we're gonna remove the OPRAs, council.
I
maybe-
definitely agree with that.
Well, part of that is if it's gutted, the assessed value will go down, so he will actually end up with a lesser tax bill.
Correct.
He'll just probably say, thank you, you told me something I didn't know, I could just reject this OPRA.
They're pretty smart people. They should have known that a long time ago, but we will, but I think we do need to move forward with, not allowing these things to drag out.
I agree.
council in general, are you in agreement with that?
Yes.
With pulling those back? Yeah. Okay, so that kind of answers 2 and 3. And we all said pretty much that we like the OPRAs, so. That give you some direction?
Very much so, thank you.
Okay.
And if you guys have questions between now and the next couple of weeks, you can always call me or email me or stop in and talk about this issue.
And I can probably understand why a smaller developer or just a local owner would prefer the OPRAs rather than dealing with the MEDC and all the paperwork and the headache, that it just isn't worth the squeeze to them, where this is straightforward and simple. That's why I think it's also more advantageous to smaller developers or people that are in the community rather than trying to attract outside developers that know how to deal with the MEDC and know how to deal with all of that. That's why I also like it, is the small guy has a decent chance at this and doesn't have a bunch of orange juice to squeeze to get their incentive to make the improvements.
Great. Is there anything else about this agenda item, council? No? I have a quick question. I heard today that the Bubba's building is condemned. Is that, it is not technically condemned?
that is not
Okay,
true.
I said I knew that they had a leak, but I hadn't heard that they'd been
Yeah.
condemned,
No,
per se.
What building?
Bubba's.
So, just real quick, since you brought it up, we did have a water leak there. We did send staff into it, and by staff, I mean our police chief, Parker Johnson went into that building, and we invited the fire chief, Nick Brink, just because water was pouring out. It suffered some significant damage. Wood floors were warped. The water heater was encased in ice. All the commodes were full of ice. So It's not condemned right now. We aren't moving forward with condemnation just because it's not occupiable. There is no mortgage, there is no probate going on. Everything's up in limbo on this. I've reached out to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. That liquor license is a Class C liquor license. It is one of the three quota license that the city had issued to it, that it was able to give to a private enterprise. Right now, our community is allowed to have 3 Class C liquor license. However, we have 4, because in the state of Michigan, you can buy a Class C liquor license anywhere in a county and move it into a new community, and that happened recently. And so that liquor license is expiring at the end of April, and the Liquor Control Commission was very clear, it will just disappear because there's not enough time for someone to submit a will, submit all the documentation, you know, their legal division has done their investigation into that entity. So the good news is there's other ways for that business to rebirth and, you know, become what it was yesterday, but they're gonna have to go through a different process through the state if they wanna acquire some kind of liquor license. They'll probably have to go through the redevelopment liquor license process.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else, council, before we move to the review of the agenda? Did anybody see any additions, corrections? Staff, was there anything we needed to amend? No, looks good. Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 6:41, reconvene at 7 o'clock for the regular meeting. Evening, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the regular session to order of our Allegan City Council. Could we do a roll call, please, Michaela?
Sure. Councilmember Zeter. Councilmember Hands.
Present.
Councilmember Byrd.
Here.
Councilmember Redding.
Here.
Councilmember Morgan. Mayor Pro Tem Galloway.
Here.
And Mayor Andrus.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we have agenda item number 3, which is our Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask everyone to please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Next, we have agenda item number 4, which is an approval of the agenda. Under 4A, approval of the regular council meeting agenda for April 11th, 2022. As we discussed in study session, there were no additions or corrections. So could I please get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move. Second.
Stereo. It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And speaking of the agendas, there are some agendas over underneath that sign if anybody needs them for the evening. Next, we have agenda item 5, which is an approval of minutes. Under 5A, we have an approval of the study session minutes from March 28th, 2022. Council, were there any additions or corrections that you noted? Staff, anything that you received? No? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the study session minutes from March 28th?
So moved.
It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Under 5B, we have an approval of the regular meeting minutes from March 28th. Going to pose the same question, council. Were there any additions or corrections? Staff? No? Seeing none, could I get a motion, please, to approve the regular meeting minutes from March 28th?
So moved.
Support.
It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we have agenda item 6, which is special presentations and recognitions by the mayor, council. Under 6A, we have a Child Abuse Prevention Month proclamation that I will be saying. And I'm going to invite Lorianne Koviak up to the podium, please. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you for having me here tonight. Appreciate it. As you know, Safe Harbor has been working with child abuse victims. Since 1983, we have been providing prevention throughout Allegan County. And each year, we serve over 200 children in Allegan County alone for severe physical abuse or sexual abuse. And in Allegan, in the 49010 zip code, we served 70 children in the last 3 years. And those are the cases that are the most severe cases. And that's what we're here for, to help provide some prevention information, to help people understand that we as adults really need to be here for the kids, to be the voice, and to help kids understand that it's okay to come forward and talk about what's happened to them. And I thank the city of Allegan for being such a big supporter of Safe Harbor and the work that we do.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to Safe Harbor for all the work you guys do. So I'm going to go ahead and do a proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Month for April 2022. Whereas last year, 31,765 children were abused or neglected in Michigan, and in Allegan County, over 2,823 investigations of child abuse and neglect were conducted in 2021. Whereas in Michigan and throughout the nation, child abuse is considered to be one of the most serious public health issues, with scientific studies documenting the link between the abuse and neglect of children in a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral disorders, including depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, severe obesity, and juvenile delinquency. And whereas child abuse prevention is an acknowledged community responsibility that strengthens families and provides a better quality of life for children. Collectively, we must promote family cohesion and resiliency, provide social support systems and knowledge of parenting and child development education in order to prevent child maltreatment and help strengthen families. And whereas during this month, we join with Safe Harbor Children's Advocacy Center to encourage citizens throughout the city of Allegan to commit to protect children from abuse and neglect. Children are the future of our state and nation, and it is our duty to help them grow and develop to their fullest potential. Let it be resolved that I, Delora Andrus, Mayor of the City of Allegan, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the City of Allegan. I urge all citizens to join me in dedicating their energies to cherishing Allegan children and helping them grow and develop free from physical, sexual, and emotional harm. Thank you.
Thank you.
So pretty staggering figures when you have them laid out like that. Very important. Next, we have Agenda Item 7, which is a first reading of ordinances and scheduling of public hearings. Under 7A.1, we have a first reading and a scheduling a second reading and public hearing for Ordinance 502 for April 25th, 2022 regarding off-road vehicles. Staff, could you give a report, please?
Sure. At a previous meeting, a group of residents of the Allegan community requested that we allow ORVs or off-road vehicles along all city streets. At that meeting, City Council asked staff to work with our city attorney to create an off-road vehicle ordinance that would allow that. As council is well aware, and this is for members of the public, all ordinances at the City of Allegan go through a two-step reading process. Tonight is your first reading. You will be approving the first reading and then scheduling a meeting for April 25th. At your April 25th meeting, you will either be adopting the ordinance or tabling the ordinance or not approving the ordinance. Some highlights of the ordinance that was in your packet. Definition of an ORV, it's an off-road vehicle that can include any 2, 3, or 4-wheeled tires. A vehicle that is designed to go off-road. It does not include snowmobiles or farm vehicles. A person under the age of 18 years of age shall not operate an ORV unless the person is in possession of a valid driver's license or under the direct supervision of a parent or guardian, and the person has in his or her immediate possession an ORV safety certificate. The speed limit for ORVs is 25 miles an hour or the lowest posted speed inside the city limits. And then all operators shall wear a crash helmet and protective eyewear. This does not apply to an individual wearing a properly adjusted and fastened seatbelt. The ordinance in your package, I think, is like 2 pages long, so it doesn't go, I mean, there's not much meat in there for you to digest, but if you have any questions about the wording or the language, you can reach out to me, or reach out to me and I can bring in the city attorney if needed, if I can't explain anything in that language. One thing I do want to point out, so 2, 3, or 4-wheeled vehicle. So this is a 3-wheeler, a quad, side-by-sides, all of those, all of the above are allowed.
Or dirt bikes.
And dirt bikes are already, I brought that up this morning, talking with our chief of police, and he goes, well, you can already get a license for a dirt bike, Joel. I said, oh, good point. I will, but thanks for clarifying that, Jay. So, yeah. So, or dirt bikes. We do have noise ordinances on how loud a vehicle can be, so that's, I know that was a concern. And I do need to share with council, our chief of police is concerned with 3-wheelers and with quads, mostly from a safety aspect of, being thrown from a vehicle if it doesn't have a roll cage. I brought up golf carts really don't have a roll cage. He goes, yeah, but they don't go that fast. So I did reach out to our city attorney to see if we, if there's a way to tighten that. But this is the time really now for council. If you have any questions about the ordinance, you can ask me. I can record your questions. You can accept it as first reading. But just know if you accept it for first reading tonight, you're scheduling that public hearing for the 25th. The ball was, moving down the court.
Thank you, Joel. Now we have any questions from council to staff. I will just note that I did receive a newsletter from Commissioner Jim Story that kind of explained that the County Road Commission voted to add more county roads because they had discluded quite a few sections of county road. I think they could exclude up to 30% of county roads. So they did vote to include additional roads, but they haven't updated the county website yet, so not exactly sure what those roads were.
So all of Trowbridge roads that touch the city on the south side are included now, and Allegan Township roads as well. So when we had this discussion last fall, you'll recall one of the concerns was there weren't many touch points to get into the city. I would say that concern's been alleviated. You know, people can come in on Babylon 118th, come in through Industrial Drive, you know, come up the south side, 34th on the Ely, et cetera.
Thank you for that clarification, Joel. Council, were there any questions for staff?
One question, I see we include hovercrafts.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
We seen one yesterday.
So I'm
Up
just,
on our
just bringing it up as a topic of discussion amongst council as something that we want to see in the city.
It's not. It's not. And I also, can I, if you're done, Peter? Joel, you just said it doesn't allow for snowmobiles or farm vehicles. It doesn't allow for farm vehicles being used as a farm vehicle, which means I can drive my tractor in as long as I'm not farming with it currently. So we could have farm vehicles.
I'll reach out to Nick and check on that. There's also some state law, I think, that supersedes farm equipment on public roads. So let me reach out to Nick regarding the farm equipment.
Yeah, so I reached out to Delora, and I've said this before when this has come up. This is exactly what we said we didn't want when we adopted the golf cart ordinance. We specifically said golf carts because we didn't want ORVs. And now we're doing ORVs, and I can't figure out what has changed in the meantime.
And my understanding was we were gonna see how like the golf carts went to review ORVs. So I don't know if, for me, when I responded back to Roger, I explained that the county was opening up more and we did have the community group come in. And then the majority of council had said, yes, go ahead and look into that. So I think that's what changed with that, Roger. Did anyone else have any clarification or is?
Just one. It's only registered snowmobiles that aren't considered ORVs, so unregistered ones are.
Again, I'll check with our city attorney, but I'm pretty sure you are not allowed to drive an unregistered snowmobile on public right-of-ways, and so that will catch everything below it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, but if you want to, I can check with our city attorney on that one.
Pretty sure the farm vehicles are excluded anyways. We get farm vehicles through town on the major roads anyways already, because they have to get through. It's, so.
And I would say, I mean, that's fine. On our main trunk, or I know the main trunk lines you can't, but like to allow vehicles to be able to pass through is fine. To come downtown is my issue. And I don't know how we make the differentiation between that, but.
Now, would farm vehicles include registered trucks that are registered as a farm vehicle? Because there is a plate specifically for farm and logging
Correct.
vehicles.
Correct.
Catch that, and then all of a sudden, they're technically not allowed downtown, which they could be here on business, because that's what the farm vehicle is for.
Yep.
They could be coming to the hardware store or wherever to go pick up parts and pieces. So, just make sure we're not like restricting out something that's, well, it's probably the state law is probably gonna override it anyways, but.
Any other questions, council? As Joel mentioned, if we accept the first reading today, then we do schedule the public hearing for the second reading, or the second reading and the public hearing.
So the reason I want to be clear on that, you have time for dialogue and, you know, get some answers to those two questions there. While at the same time, if you're very passionate about this one way or the other, tonight's a good night to let us know you're passionate one way or the other, so staff can address any concerns or just write that stuff off as they're passionately against it.
Yeah, I would say I'm not in favor of this. Yeah.
Thanks, Roger. Bill, did you have something?
Is a mule that's used for farm usage, is that considered an ORV or just a farm usage machine?
Again, that is something I don't know the answer to, but I can ask.
Because last night I saw one going down M89.
Sure.
Across the bridge, up Marshall Street, past Peter's house. And it's not even passed yet.
Hey, there's just saving on gas, you know. Gas prices are up, you gotta, so save where you can.
I'm not sure if livestock falls under, or animal.
No, the mule is a type of.
Oh, okay. No, here I thought you meant like an actual mule. I'm like, really?
No.
You're asking this question?
There's a gator
Yes.
too. you
Yeah,
know?
I understand gators, mules. My brother has a Yamaha down in Kentucky.
That was cute.
That's awesome.
Good job, Joel.
Thanks for making me look stupid.
They're really saving on
You
your
record our
estimate.
meetings. That was awesome. So scratch Bill's question about animals.
I'm sorry.
I'll get you on the golf course, don't worry.
Yeah, I know, you're up out there. But that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, that's an ORV. And there's a whole nother level that we're gonna have to work with on our state trunk lines. And, you know, the community's been very helpful with me on accessing, you know, the state laws and the state exceptions to allow them to go on state trunk lines. We're gonna have to, you know, go to the state, ask for an exception over the M222 bridge over the Kalamazoo River, you know, between River Street and Water Street. And I think we should talk to them about M89's bridge, because that neighborhood, what I call the Marshall Street neighborhood, wouldn't really have access into the downtown, except going, you know, across Division to Bond to Eastern, you know, down low to River in that way, so.
That's M222, so we're still on
Yeah.
state trunk line.
We'll just have to deal with that one bridge part, but.
Sure, okay.
So council, if we are accepting this first reading, then I need a motion to schedule the public hearing.
I make a motion to accept it.
And to
First
schedule the
read.
public hearing on April 25th?
Yes.
Could I get a support? It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No,
Motion carries 5-2. Thank you. Next, we have agenda item number 10, which is written petitions, reports from special committees under, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped public comment. Agenda item number 9. This is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. If there's any public comment for an item not on the agenda, I'll invite you up. Scott? If you could just state your name and address, please.
So my name is Scott Beltman, address 3110 130th Avenue, Hopkins. I know I've addressed your council before. I come for two reasons tonight, one for the ORV stuff, but more importantly, I've decided to run for county commissioner for the newly formed 4th district, which will include the city of Allegan. I'm no politician by any means, but I know right from wrong. I've been going to a lot of meetings the last 2 years dealing with this ORV stuff. And to say that I'm less than happy is one way of putting it. I think I can do better. I think I can represent the jurisdictions at the county level better than maybe it's been represented in the past. I look forward to working with the local jurisdictions and bringing that to the county, not just bringing the county to the local jurisdictions. And I'd appreciate, you know, Allegan's support moving forward. Second reason I'm here tonight is to encourage the council to pass that ORV ordinance as written. I've read through it. It's very similar to the county ordinance, which makes it a lot easier for people to understand what they can and can't do. If they're already doing it, it's been in effect for about 10 months at the county level. Most recently, Fenville just passed an ordinance. It mirrors the county ordinance. And I know yours is real close to it as well. That would make it real easy for us. I know a lot of people, I don't know everybody in the audience, but I know a lot of them are here in support of that ordinance as written. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or if you want to talk to me about the upcoming election or me running for county commissioner, you can contact me anytime. I know most of you have my contact information. So
Thank you, Scott.
thank you.
Charles, I think I saw you stand up as well. I'll invite you on up to the podium. Can I have you state your name and your address, please?
Charles Tripp for 19 Hastings Street. I came tonight to talk about something that happened in our neighborhood last year. As we know, we have marijuana stores in town where people can buy marijuana and it's their right to smoke it. But it's not their right, as I understand it, under Michigan law, to sit out in their backyards and smoke it. They have to stay inside their house to smoke it. We had a case where a neighbor had company over, was having a good time in their backyard, and we have one house, a duplex, that they like to have marijuana smoking parties outside. And the smell of the skunk smell got so bad, they had to cancel their party, and they moved this spring. They sold their house and moved to Otsego because they said they weren't gonna put up with it. And looking at the city ordinances, I did not see any ordinances, unless I missed it, that address this issue. That people have property rights, people have the right to sit in their backyard and enjoy their backyard without smelling the smell of marijuana. And it got so bad in our neighborhood that this particular house, they were out there, the minute they got home from work, 3:30, and were out there till midnight. 6, 7, 8 people just smoking away where everybody else was hiding in their houses so they didn't have to smell it. And unfortunately, when you run your central air conditioning, you suck the smell in your house too. So my question is, will the city of Allegan put an ordinance in place so if the police are called, they have something to back up their call with, then tell them where the state of Michigan says you have to smoke it in your house. And that's not gonna quite do it because they're gonna have call after call going back to the same residents. And unless you have an ordinance that impose some kind of penalty for doing it after you're warned, the situation's not gonna never go away. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Charles. Is there any further public comment? No? Seeing none, we'll move down to agenda item 10, which is the written petitions and reports from special committees. Under 10A, we have a request from the Plainwell Kayak Company. Staff?
Yes. A year ago, the Plainwell Kayak Company petitioned the council to allow them to run a business in Hanson Park. And basically, this is just another request for the year 2022. So it's up to you to handle it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Joel or other staff, do you have anything to add?
We recommend that you approve this request.
Okay, thank you. Council, did you have any questions for Doug or staff? Okay. It is a good thing. Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the request from Plainwell Kayak Company?
So moved.
It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion, council? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we have agenda item number 11, which is a reports from boards, commissions, and city offices. Under 11A, city boards, commissions, and area agencies, we have a 11A.1, which is the Historic District Commission April meeting update. Dave?
Yeah, so there was only one application this time. It was from 128 Locust Street, which I think folks would know kind of colloquially is the creative events building that had all the Pebble facade. That building's going to go through significant rework, and they're going to expose a lot of the historic brick. So that seemed like a really big investment, really great investment, very visible downtown. So the commission was supportive of that. We also discussed, I'd been contacted by a homeowner in the city who had attempted to buy windows at Home Depot, and she was denied because they needed a letter from the historic district, which hadn't come up before. So we kind of discussed why that might have happened. Interestingly, I ran into her later, and she told me that her realtor had also told her she was in the historic district. But when we checked with PCI, they said they didn't see her in the historic district. So I think there's some more investigation to do there. But the Home Depot thing was just interesting. We weren't we weren't really sure how Home Depot came into that practice or what the backstory was there. And then we also discussed, folks may be familiar with the home on the corner of, this would be 222 and Cedar, the one that the car ran into around Thanksgiving. She's actually on the HDC board, and one of the discussion points was, I had been talking with her about the idea of, you know, that a car ran into your house, like that's a big thing, and have you had like an architect look at it and an engineer to assess whether or not you need more work and making sure that when the insurance money comes through, it covers all the work that's gonna be required. And she'd been struggling with how to approach insurance companies and how to work through that whole process. So I reached out to our CLG representative for the State Historic Preservation Office. The CLG program has a specific community representative to see if I could get any assistance for. CLG program normally has architects on staff, but they were short-staffed for architects. So he was kind enough to reach out to a couple of the other HDCs, the Holland and Grand Rapids areas, and there is a common practice from them that when you run into situations where a homeowner has significant repairs that, you know, maybe above and beyond what a normal insurance would cover, or something unique that, you know, this is a historic home that needs to be preserved, and so we just want to make sure everything's done correctly. It is common for HDCs to write letters. And actually, one of the HDCs was like, oh yeah, we've had cars run into houses before. And, you know, it didn't occur to me that that would be a common thing, but yeah, so I'm hoping that Lori will be able to follow up and kind of help this homeowner through that process and make sure she gets the work done that she needs to preserve her historic home. And then the study group met, and we had a discussion about moving forward. There was a lot of emphasis on making sure that we got the community members back in. A couple of the community members chose not to participate in the new process, but I've got to follow up with them and just make sure that they're on board and that we're able to keep moving. But ultimately, they decided to continue the committee's good work in that first meeting in May, so.
Thanks, Dave. I just have a quick question. With that CLG, do they do anything with fire? Because we've had a couple historic homes with fire damage.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't know for sure. I don't know how much resource they would put into that. I think one of the hardest questions to answer in regards to fire or when the home actually gets demolished is what do you do with the new build? Interestingly, for our historic districts, our historic districts are bounds. So they're not like a listing of here are all the historic homes in your area and A, B, C, D, or this house, this house, this house. It's more about this area is historic because of these reasons, which you don't find. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to cut historic districts. But for ours, because it's like an area and this is the significance of that area, there isn't necessarily like all the homes here are Edwardian or all the homes here are Victorian or all the homes here are this style and they need this kind of roof. So similarly at the previous meeting where we got the homeowners one of the homeowners who is looking to demolish their home on Marshall and rebuild, they had 4 designs, and we didn't really have a basis for saying it needs to be this design or this design or this design. I think if we were to say a new home build needs to be this, then it would be something that maybe there would be some sort of CLG support for. But when it's just demolishing and we don't have particular restrictions, I just don't know how that would work.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have 11B, which is our finance department. So under 11B.1, we have an approval of accounts payable and payroll. Teresa?
Okay, we had accounts payable in the amount of $1,265,667.99, and payroll in the amount of $99,378.03. The total disbursement was $1,365,046.02. Make a motion to approve.
Could I get a support? It has been moved and supported. Council, are there any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we have 11B.2, which is a request to schedule a public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 budget.
No problem. We don't need a slide for that budget. That's anyways. Yeah, so tonight you're just scheduling your budget hearing for the fiscal year 23 budget. It is set to be May 9th, 2022.
Council, did you have any questions for staff regarding the public hearing for the budget on May 9th?
What time?
During your regular meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions, council? Seeing none, could I get a motion, please, to set a public hearing for May 9th, 2022 for fiscal year 2023 budget?
So moved.
Support.
It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we have 11B.3, which is a request to adopt Resolution 22.17, which is an acceptance of the Federal American Rescue Plan funds and authorizing the proposed spending plan for the ARPA funds. Staff?
Yep. As part of the city's allocation of $525,000, I believe it is, and some change, we have to pass a resolution formally accepting that funding from the federal government.
Council, did you have any questions for staff? We've discussed the funds usage a few times. Okay, seeing none, could I get a motion to adopt Resolution 22.17?
So moved. Support.
It has been moved and supported. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we have 11E, which is our Public Works. Under 11E.1, we have a request to adopt Resolution 22.18, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a contract with MDOT. Hi, Doug.
A year ago, the city entered into a contract with MDOT for the bidding and contract administration for the Second Street Bridge and Second Street project. Last fall, the city received an additional $27,000 in small urban funding to be used toward projects. What we opted to do was apply that toward the bridge project. So as a result of that, they'd like an amended contract with the city. That's all this is.
Thanks, Doug. That's great news.
Yes, it is.
Are there any questions, Council, for Doug? Or Joel, did you have anything else to add? No? Any questions? No? Could I get a motion, please, to adopt Resolution 22.18?
So moved.
Support.
It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Next, we have 11F, which is city manager and city clerk. Under 11F.1, we have a request to approve the special use permit for a marijuana growing facility at 845 Industrial Drive, as was recommended by the Allegan City Planning Commission. This was a table agenda item from March 28th. Staff?
Excuse me.
Sure, I'll kick it off, and then I believe the applicants are in the audience. If there's questions of the applicants, council may ask those. Mayor, if you'd like to open the floor for public comment on this, you may also do that if you feel the need to.
Thank you.
In the report, it was pretty self-explanatory. At your last meeting, council requested several items from the applicant, talking about their odor control process and how they plan on handling that. You also received a letter from Lori Costello, who is our zoning consultant, our contractor, handles all of our zoning information. In her letter, she was clear about the process for approvals, on how we handle special use permits, and that there are, quite a few parts of the ordinance that are enforced during the review of the building permits. An example of this is if a site plan comes through the planning commission and they have to, submit a storm water detention program. The planning commission typically does not get their calculators out and do volume and stuff like that. That is reviewed, by our drain commission in consultation with our Department of Public Works during the building permit review and approval process. Do you have any questions for staff of the stuff we submitted in your packet?
Council, do you have any questions? No? Okay. Dave?
The applicant's also here if you have questions about the stuff the applicant submitted. Yeah.
I guess, well, I'll at first ask just a request to be heard. It's been brought to my attention, there's been some speculation in the community, so I wanted to just clarify a couple things. One, I don't currently work for Perigo. I used to work for Perigo. I am independent of Perigo, and Perigo is independent of me. And two, I really want to see, my interest in this is seeing this development succeed. I recognize the significance of a development like this where there will be local jobs in our city for local people, and those people will spend their money in our local economy, and I very much am supportive of that type of progress. I guess my interest in this right now, and part of my question for staff about this process is, it seems like we've got a fair amount of responsibility in this process before we release this process from city council to make sure that we've got all our Ts crossed and all our Is dotted. And given that I think it's fair to anticipate there's a fair amount of attention on this. What's kind of how do we know what all the requirements are and that they've all been met? And it just feels like we should have a clear list of that. And I see some conditions in the form, but shouldn't there be like a clear checklist so that everybody involved in the process understands what's required and there aren't any surprises?
So the requirements, you can go back to the zoning ordinance as it was created a few years ago. And in the zoning ordinance, the city council reviewed, adopted that. It talked, covered several items, signage, storage disposal. You can't store things outside overnight. Your outdoor storage of trash and rubbish has to be appropriately screened. You get into the control and eliminate odor as follows. And it goes through what's expected for that, negative air pressure. The filters shall be rated for the applicable, cubic feet per minute of the building. You fall into all doors and windows must remain closed except for minimum time lengths needed. So they can't, some factories open their, sliding doors on the hot days to cool people off. The grow facility cannot do that. Neither can a retail store do that. The roof can be, translucent, but it can't be open. We do not allow for greenhouse growers or outdoor growers. Some states allow for that. The city of Allegan does not allow for that. All grow centers have to be wholly enclosed in a building. So all those, what I'm gonna call checkpoints are in the ordinance. And when a person submits for a building permit from PCI, all that stuff is reviewed and PCI signs off at that end. In addition to looking at the structural engineering, looking at, the ADA requirements for a new construction, looking at, HVAC to make sure, the heating and cooling system is gonna work properly. So I understand and I hear what you're saying about, there's a lot on council for approving a special use permit. I would say you have a lot of protection through the existing ordinance. And we don't require, developers to bring all that stuff up front at the very, beginning. They have to show a basic site plan showing that they are good, that they can meet the conditions of our ordinance, the stipulations of our ordinance, and then they go and do a full depth engineering.
Given that this is the first grow facility that we've had in the city and that this is an emerging industry, so part of my professional background involves compliance assessments, and I know that interpretation and clarification are very important when you've got high-level ordinance requirements. Understanding what it takes to meet those high-level ordinance requirements, that's very important. And When in this process does the applicant get some sort of clarity from the city of here's exactly what you need to do to meet, and here are our expectations and standards for meeting?
Yeah. So during the review process of the building permit, is they submit their plans based on what our ordinance is. And then at PCI, we have, the building inspector, plan reviewer, then we have the plumbing, inspector, then we have the mechanical inspector, and the mechanical inspector is your HVAC system guy. They go through and they review it, and they say, yeah, you either are meeting the ordinance and the state construction code, or you're not. Most recently was Green Door. Green Door is a provision, what I'm gonna call a provision center. I believe they do both adult and medical at Green Door. Green Door is located on Lynn Street over by the hospital. Green Door's original plan for air filtration did not meet our standards. And so we had a conversation, and by we, I mean PCI had a conversation with them. I had a small conversation when they reached out and they said, is there anything you can do? And I said, no. You either meet the ordinance or you don't meet the ordinance. It's, straightforward that way. And so we've had no complaints of, odor control at the Green Door facility. You'll recall when you approved the special use permit across the street, Dr. Connell from Wings of Hope came and, spoke, because they had concerns about the implication of having, a provision center across the street from Wings of Hope. We've had no complaints or concerns since they've been open and running. That process of allowing the developer to go through the engineering post-approval is a common process. In my 20 years of doing planning work in the city of Holland and then down here, it is not atypical in my field. And it's not just very simple where it really doesn't affect adjoining property owners. Stormwater detention, if, a drain structure fails in a stormwater drain, that negatively affects neighbors because water runs everywhere it shouldn't go. And so, it's common, to approve things, or give a condition approval saying you have to receive formal approval by the inspectors, whether it's your drain commissioner, mechanical inspector, your plan reviewer, building inspector, or your electrical inspector.
Is that the same process we followed for all development in the industrial park?
Not at the very beginning when the industrial park was first formed. There was a condo association created out there because the city of Allegan owned most of the lots. It was called the Highland Industrial Park, and it was just the southern half of the Highland Industrial Park. So where this facility is located, that bin, that's not part of the Highland Industrial Park. That bin was an addition after the fact. So the Highland Industrial Park had a condo association where people had to go through an architectural review board. Somewhere along the line, the city of Allegan decided to sell all of their lots for storage units instead of job creators. I'm not sure why, but that's why we, later on, we'll be talking about another industrial park property that is trying to grow but can't grow. They have some condominium standards they used to have. When I arrived here in 2017, they were still meeting occasionally. And one of the standards is you can't store anything outside your building. And I just asked them, I'm like, well, I see a lot of material stored outside buildings on pallets and, crates. And they go, yeah, we don't worry about that. There's a very intense landscaping requirement in the industrial park. Almost like they wanted to create some nice office park that you would see off 44th Street in Breton up in Kentwood when they were expanding. And all the industrial buildings and office buildings are, immaculate. This has not happened. I mean, that condo association just kind of.
So this lot is outside of, I believe they're called restrictive covenant.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, they are called restrictive covenants for condominiums. But local governments don't have control over that. Our involvement back then is because the city owned the majority of the lots. We're considered the developer of that park.
My question is about this lot. Is it under that restrictive covenant, or is it?
I do not believe it is. I'm not a member of that condominium association, just like I'm not a member of the Depot Hill Condo Association or the High Banks Condo Association in the city of Allegan.
It just seems like the city would need to let an applicant know if they were inside of the formal.
So I will push back just a little, and I use the word pushback. We do have people come into us after they buy a property, and they said, why didn't you let us know there was an easement running through our property? And our comment is, we do not get involved in title purchases or title closings. Hopefully, you bought title insurance when you went through your closing process.
Okay.
I'm like, no, we just got a good deal. And I'm like, well, unfortunately, it's because there was a water main that went through that middle of that property. You got a good deal. It was a mostly unbuildable lot.
Okay. Well, okay, so let's go with this lot is outside of the industrial park. I guess my question is about consistency of process. So I assume Parago's large facility would have been outside of that industrial park because it's on kind of that same part of the road.
Yeah.
Would they have gotten like an approval with conditions for their build similar to what our process is for this?
Probably because Jeff Melvin was on the AAC when I first came here. That's the Architectural Advisory Committee in that and that condominium association. And comments were made that they had to go through that process. And so when we started when that condo association started talking about dissolving, it's when we looked into, that group looked into it. And at that time, we still owned some property out there. We still owned the property where this site is being built before we sold it. We still own both sites of A2P products before we sold to them. We still own the land across from the distribution center where Recycle Now, before that industrial building was built. I mean, it's a pole barn, but it's an industrial building. They do industrial work in there. Michigan Gas, we still own Michigan Gas before we sold the property that Michigan Gas Distribution Center was built on. We sold a lot of property in that industrial park in the past, 5 years. So they may have had to go through there because there was an assumption that that northern part was part of the original Highlands Condominium Association.
Joel, is that still in effect, or is that dissolved?
I believe it's dissolved.
And if it was even still in effect, the only thing that they're reviewing is their architectural plans, correct?
I believe so.
And landscaping and things like that. They're not doing anything like what you're building there or anything like that. That wasn't part of their
Okay,
park.
But don't restrictive covenants like go with the land? I mean, doesn't it not matter if there's a board?
I would say it's outside the bailiwick of the city government on what restrictive covenants are. So in your larger cities, in your suburbs, if, picture yourself, in Caledonia, Forest Hills, school district area. All those subdivisions have homeowners associations, and they have restrictive covenants. That's a whole nother level of regulation that the local government does not get involved in.
Okay.
And some are very tight and very successful because people just ride those rules. And then some, after the first generation moves out, people forget those rules exist. The next thing you know, you start seeing garage doors are left open. And you start seeing, children's play things in the front yard. And then someone calls the city and they say, hey, the garage door's open. And we say, we don't control that. That is a condominium bylaw. That's a homeowners association. You can use the word restrictive covenant. It could be a deed, restriction. But that is, the city does not, enforce, regulate, or oversee deed restrictions.
I was just going to mention that Dave, you had kind of asked about how they know what they need to meet. If you look at like page 60 of the packet, that's where PCI's information starts coming in. So they have each section listed out here, and then the finding that the planning or the PCI went through to see if they were in compliance with that part of the ordinance, the requirement. So that comes forward, and then the reason that Planning Commission had approved that with conditions is there were a few things that weren't addressed. I know that they've addressed a couple of those since then. But that's how PCI goes through their application and makes sure that it hits each of these points before they bring it to planning, and then planning will decide whether to, grant that special use permit, and then in that case, we have to bring it up to council for their approval as well. But I'm just gonna real quick say that, I heard that there were some concerns by Perigo, and I know that you gentlemen are here. And I can say I'm nothing if I'm not thorough. So I took some of that information and I did some research into that. One of the things that you were concerned with is that Allegan County is an ozone non-attainment area. And I wasn't exactly sure what a non-attainment area was, frankly. So when I looked that up, and just so my fellow council members know, per the American Lung Association, a non-attainment is the technical term that means an area that has too much of one of the most widespread and dangerous air pollutants. In this case, it would be ozone. So I did go to the EPA's website, and it is true that Allegan County is listed as an 8-hour ozone non-attainment area. That information was updated as recently as March the 31st. However, there are certain locations within Allegan County that fall in that area. City of Allegan, Township of Allegan is not. And I've actually got a map that I highlighted to show where those ozone attainment areas are. So it's everything to the west of Allegan. So we've got a couple areas that do hit us, but they don't necessarily. Allegan City, Allegan Township is not part of that non-attainment area, but Allegan County is included in that. So did find that out. And then also, cannabis grows can add to the ozone problem. That is true. That has been looked into. And so what happens with that is Colorado, you mentioned Colorado, they're doing all this studies into terpenes, which is the organic compound that makes the cannabis smell. And they are classified as a volatile organic compound, and they're harmless unless they combine with other combustion gases like nitrous oxides and sunlight, and that's when they create ground level ozone. So that could contribute to this. However, when you even said at Perigo that comparing Allegan and Colorado, Denver areas, apples to oranges. We have one facility, that's probably all we would ever be able to have because of our ordinance language with 1,000 feet barrier and from schools, et cetera. So they did have a big study, and William Visuetti, I think, I'm not sure if I pronounce his name correctly, but he found that the cannabis grown do contribute anywhere from 66 to 657 tons of emissions per year. He even had to admit that that's a really broad range. They can't really specify where that falls. And then that volatile organic compound is about 0.5% to 3.5% increase in that area. So it does add to the ozone, but it's a very small level. And most of their cultivation in Colorado and their marijuana-infused product facilities are in a very dense urban area, which again isn't going to apply to Allegan. I mean, we're not a dense urban area. So yes, there are going to be some emissions that it would counteract with and perhaps create some ground ozone. However, that's when we get into the carbon filtration systems. So in 2019, the Desert Research Institute also studied some air quality inside growing facilities in Nevada and Colorado, or in California, excuse me. And there are some high levels of biogenic volatile organic compounds, but with carbon filtration systems, that is going to capture pretty much all of that. 98% is what they kind of said. The information that the applicant submitted to us was, I believe, 99% with those different carbon. So right now, there's no federal guidance in this industry about the VOCs because it's still illegal at a federal level, so they can't even get involved with any of the studies. So the states are kind of left to set their standards on their industry. There aren't any in Colorado. They still haven't done anything with that, and they're years ahead of Michigan in in their hosting of these cannabis industries. So it was also noted that emissions do pose some air quality concerns, but it's really unclear what would happen because a lot of farming is exempt from these emissions anyway. So, yeah, Colorado does not even require that they have carbon filters, though they do admit that they do have a really good percentage of capturing that information. And I do have the air quality guidelines from Colorado, if anybody on council wants to look at those too. So Allegan does have within our own ordinance all these carbon filtration requirements. And so I see that you guys did send that information. You did that before you were required to at our request, so I appreciate that. But that was just some of the information that I was able to gather with some searching. So if anybody has any questions, I have all of that information with me here too. Any other questions?
I just appreciate you all bearing with us and jumping through a few more hoops to make us more comfortable. I'm still not an expert and still not an engineer, but I appreciated getting the extra information and having some time, more time to look at that, so appreciate it.
We appreciate your consideration and your diligence in protecting your community. And, yeah, we're excited about the.
Could you step up? We're just having a hard time hearing. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited about creating jobs here, and there is another thing that we're implementing that can address some of your concerns, Mr. Reddick. Because this is a special use permit, it has these conditions as opposed to being by right. And to limit the opportunity for poor performance of all the air emissions control equipment, we're developing 2 separate action plans for preventative maintenance of all the planned air pollution control equipment, and will be consistent with all the Michigan air quality rules along that line. The plan's intended to comply with this Michigan Air Quality Rule 910, and that'll be completed before the plant startup, and will be maintained, so. The first phase of this will have 5,000 plants, and the second phase will add 5, but there'll be no processing. The processing creates more of the VOC, so that's where they're using solvents to do extractions. That's not part of this project.
Higher levels of butane, I learned as well, when you do
Right.
processing.
Right,
But so you're not doing any processing at the plant?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the developer, MRK Development, the owner is present here. And once this gets developed, this will be leased to 100 Leafs will be the license holder. And we had our engineers and everyone had good discussions with the state air quality specialists, Jennifer Dixon and John Caudell, and we'll be consulting Mr. Caudell along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, were there any questions?
Thank you.
No? Okay.
Just to reiterate, as their attorney said, this is a special use. You can add conditions. I would add a condition that there was what I'm just gonna call PNM, Preventive Maintenance Plan for the air filtration is submitted, reviewed, and approved by staff prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued.
I guess I'm a little hung up on this condition thing. I'm just nervous about, how do I know what all the conditions need to be? I mean, I don't think I see a preventative maintenance plan listed here, but that's a good one.
Well, that's what he just talked about.
Right,
He
no,
said they're
that
developing too, so yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, but I'm thinking if PCI didn't already tell us all the conditions here, like, when do we build that list?
So the
in
preventive
the
and
ordinance.
maintenance
in our
plan,
ordinance.
it's in the ordinance. First of all, that's correct. The mayor and Councilmember Hansi are correct. Also, I had conversations with their consultant, and we discussed that on the phone. He was the one who offered that to me, saying they could make that a condition, have that come in, but it is in the ordinance, that it has to be maintained at peak operating performance, so. But if you guys feel more comfortable with that being a condition, that we have that on record, and the right to inspect, something like that, we can work something out like that.
I feel like the conditions that Planning Commission approved this with are sufficient. I'm just one person, so if anyone else has any thoughts on that. I mean, they've met the conditions of the ordinance per our zoning administrator, except those few conditions. And we approved that ordinance as it was written, and that was drafted with the help of an attorney, and it had to be reviewed by the state in order for it to go through. Because we had to opt in or opt out, and they needed to see our ordinance in order to allow us to do that.
Okay, you mean, so the ordinance was reviewed? Well, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I see a findings of fact sheet, and I see there's I assume items from the ordinance, and it looks like it should be marked like complies, does not comply, and nothing's marked on there. Does that mean that?
It will say that this condition has been met, if you like read through them.
Well, findings of fact, this would be like page 68, 69.
So Dave, all I can say is that the planning commission already approved this like unanimously to come up. So they felt after review that this did comply with our ordinance. And PCI recommended, as our staff, that we approve it with conditions. Any questions? Okay, seeing no questions then,
I did have one.
go ahead, Bill.
You're gonna put that, mentioning what you just said as a, condition in the ordinance?
So it's in the ordinance right now, as, you know, the mayor and Councilmember Hans pointed out. And
There?
The
Yeah.
maintenance.
the maintenance is in there already.
For those watching at home, could you all start using your microphone, please?
So they are in the ordinance.
Thank you, Rachel.
Those would be, you know, if that's a condition, staff wants to reiterate is the word I would use. The council has the right to reiterate, but if the majority of council doesn't want to reiterate it because it's already in the ordinance, that's also okay.
Well, I think it was a matter of that they were having a maintenance plan would be something to add, to just say that they have to submit their maintenance plan. The maintenance is required. If they don't do their maintenance and we have complaints, we always also have the option, to go to the state and say, we don't want them to have a license because they're not following our ordinances. That's our last line of enforcement usually on this, is my understanding. So they have to follow and they have to maintain. There's not supposed to be odors emitted, going by our own ordinance. That's, if we have a facility or something that's not complying and doing what they're supposed to be doing, that can always be a problem. We can have all these conditions on it, and if they don't do it, our enforcement is, hey, you're not doing the ordinance, you're not following our ordinance, and we say, we're not gonna recommend the state renew your license. And that's how that kind of goes, is my understanding, under the Michigan marijuana laws.
Did you gentlemen have anything you'd like to say from Perigo?
want to make sure it was open to be there. Deborah, thank you for, Rob Summers from Perigo. Thank you for reading that information. I wanted to clarify a comment. Early on, when I said about ozone non-attainment, I said obviously it was being reclassified this year, and Allegan City, where we are and where this facility is not in yet. So I just want to make sure I clarified that. The first time I said that, I made that clear. A couple of things. I think what David is saying and what a couple of other people have said strikes me. It's the specifications, and that was our point. Carbon absorption doesn't tell you efficiency. Obviously, they provided some information which we didn't have previously. One of the vendors identified that it would be 99.9% efficient. That's great. A specification says 99.9% efficient. The other unit by Vortex does not give a specification. It just says it's going to be carbon. You can have carbon that's 95% efficient. You can be 99% efficient. So a specification of what it means is what I'm asking for. That operation and maintenance plan, that's great. Saying that it's going to be operating correctly and having an operation and maintenance plan documented, those are two different things. So you set a performance standard, but you don't have guidelines of what that performance looks like and say exactly what you're going to do. You just say it's going to operate and be maintained efficiently. Having a plan that says you're going to do A, B, C, and D is what we're asking for. You still haven't defined, and I know you're going to hopefully define it at the time you do the building permit, but today it's not defined. What are the expectations? Just to have carbon absorption and to have no odors. It's not operating yet. Specifications will hopefully drive you to 99.9%, and then you can assume
that it'll perform. The other thing is, I've heard scrubber mentioned previously, and I've heard carbon absorption. I've seen no information on a scrubber. I've only heard about carbon absorption. So just curious, is there going to be a scrubber and carbon absorption, which are two different treatment technologies, or is it just going to be carbon? I know the ordinance says carbon, but I think earlier on I heard comments from the applicant that it would be both. I'm only asking for an odor mitigation plan and the preventive maintenance plan. If those things happen and it operates correctly, there will be no issues, there will be no odor, and we won't be concerned about it. But this is when you have the opportunity to get it right. Putting the specifications in place now, more definitive guardrails over saying it'll perform and there shouldn't be odors. Setting the specification of what will make sure that it performs correctly is what we're looking for.
Okay, and can I ask, are you aware if the state has any specifications? Because everything I looked at, they don't have any specifications at the state level. So
Exactly.
for us to come up with a specification with no guidance from the state, when they, or if they come up with a specification, then that can be adopted into our ordinance to enforce. But until that time, I don't think city council is gonna be able to do a specification.
So I guess what I'm saying is you know, you did your reading, you know it's an issue, you know it's out there, so approve it and not put a specification in place. There are specifications out there.
So if there's
Just because a
yeah.
regulatory agency hasn't done it, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. This is
So
your
if there's
opportunity.
if there's an odor that is being detected, at that point, you would want to contact our enforcement agencies so that they could go out and look into that.
Right. That's after the fact. My point is you have the ability to do it now instead of waiting until you have a problem. You can prevent that problem from occurring, and that's all I'm asking for.
Okay.
But instead of saying it's after the fact, we're gonna deal with it by the local ordinance for odor, that's kind of missing the boat. You've had an opportunity now. That's my point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, did you have any questions? Okay. If you got a comment, come on up.
Just one quick one. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Kate and Javille Roush on behalf of Parago as well. I just wanted to address a legal point that goes to the significance of what Rob Summers just said and addresses something that Mr. Dye said. Yes, Mr. Dye is right to a point that there are a lot of rules and regulations that you aren't here to apply. Stormwater management systems, you aren't here to review those. Building code requirements, you aren't here for that. There's other regulations in place and other procedures in place for addressing those. But the ones we're talking about are conditions of a special use permit. That's what we're talking about. The odor elimination requirement is a condition of the special use permit. And the applicant's required to meet their burden to show that they can satisfy that condition. And our position is that at this point, they still haven't done that because what they've submitted, the information they've submitted is information, but it's not a commitment to a particular plan, a particular system that shows that they're going to eliminate odors. This is not like we're asking you to review the building plans to ensure that the building code has been satisfied. The building code is not in this zoning ordinance. Building code is separate, and it's a separate process. But these conditions here are in the zoning ordinance, and that's what you're here for, is to enforce that zoning ordinance and make sure those conditions are met for this before the special use is granted.
And actually, the odor elimination, control, and maintenance of the negative indoor air pressure, that's due at the time of the building permit application. So we did ask them to provide that information early. So that,
Is that in the zoning ordinance that says that, or?
I'm looking at page 8 of our information that was provided from PCI, our summary and conclusion.
Right. What I'm referring to is what the zoning ordinance says in 1707.33B 10. Here's the conditions of a special use, this particular special use. And this process we're in here is to make sure that those conditions are met. And just like with a site plan, where you make sure that the setbacks are satisfied, in the site plan, by requiring the site plan ahead of time and not just saying, well, you built that wrong and now you've got to fix it because it doesn't meet the setback requirements. We think that's the same process that ought to be applied here for the odor elimination, which means what are the plans? What are the specific plans that show that the odors will be eliminated as required? Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
There's a little bit of static here. 422 Water Street, Rachel McKenzie. I don't know much about special use permits or marijuana growing facilities. I do know that the city uses clean linen sprays to make sure that the sewage odor from the wastewater treatment plant is sufficient for the residents that live in that area. So I would imagine, and I don't know, perhaps you guys would check into that, that that's sufficient for Perigo and those folks there on Industrial Drive.
Thank you. Council, did you have any questions?
So just from like a legal procedural standpoint, I'll share, I know that of at least one grow facility that was built wasn't approved for final use and is empty. This was like Kalkaska area. I imagine that's a possibility in this process too, that it gets built all the way and we look at it and it's like, oh, this doesn't, now we know this doesn't meet, or the state knows it doesn't meet. The other, I guess my more direct question in this arena is, right now we're inside of our process. Another situation I've heard of is like once an approval had been given, there can be challenges post-approval. So like if an outside party, like we're in this process together right now, if an outside party is watching this process and says, oh, this process wasn't well executed and wasn't well defined, now, once we apply this approval, it's outside of that process, so they would seek some sort of recourse another way in the courts or something like that.
Sure, this is America.
Yeah.
We have lawyers for a reason. Anyone can sue anyone. So if somebody, I mean, in my 20-some years in local government, I've never been a party of a lawsuit over any decision made in my official capacity. Others have been, though. We talk about them when we go to conferences. I would offer the process we're going through on this is within our accepted practices as the City of Allegan. We have, as I mentioned, we have done 2 special use permit processes regarding marijuana facilities. Timber, which is located at 139 Marshall? Yeah, 139 Marshall, next to Riverside Market, and then Green Door at 500 Lynn Street, over by the hospital. Through that process, we've had no complaints in regards to odor. We've had nobody threaten any kind of lawsuit about our process for approving those special use permits and moving them forward. You've actually, those are the 2 that have been built. You've also approved special use permits for 919 Marshall, which is the old Sweet Temptations ice cream shop next to McDonald's. You've approved a special use permit for Joyology, which is 400 Water Street. And those have not even been built yet. But we put no conditions except you have to comply with the zoning ordinance. And they have flowers. They're not a grow facility, I understand that. But they have flowers. They have concentrates, they have edibles, which might be a concentrate, I don't know the industry that well. So, but they have marijuana inside their buildings. And they had to go through, they had to do provide how they're gonna handle odor control. As I mentioned in the example with the one provision center, they pushed back on our HVAC guy up at PCI. PCI said, sorry, this is what the rules are. And I've driven around those, I've stood on sidewalks outside those, I've tried to breathe in deep, because I want to know if are we missing something? We haven't missed it. During the development of the ordinance, I wasn't at the last meeting, but the mayor mentioned it. It was, Mayor Andrus and 2 other council members and myself that went down to Bangor to tour a, grow facility. across that street was some kind of chemical plant, turpentine or paint thinner. You smelled the operations they were having. You did not smell what was going on at that Bangor Grove facility until you were inside it. And then, yeah, you smelled it once you were inside it. So I believe the applicant is meeting the conditions, meeting the standards in our ordinance. And, you know, they've gone a little bit, you know, they've answered questions from council. They're not going to answer, they're not going to satisfy all of your inquiries because that just may not be possible. They're not going to make everybody happy. If you're not excited about this, they're just not excited about this as individuals.
Roger, did you have something?
So from, just as I'm processing all this, from what I hear from Perigo, they just want to see a plan. The applicant has said, or I believe you said you have redundant plans. You put 2 plans in place. So can we just say, we'll approve this and just ask the applicant to provide the plan so that satisfies Perigo and we can move on?
Yeah, that's already a condition that we sent it forward from with planning was the odor elimination, control, and maintenance of the negative indoor air pressure. So if you wanted to add, like Joel had said, to add the extra condition of the actual maintenance plan, we can do that.
That they submit it to staff, our review and approval, and before they get a COO, which is a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
I don't know which way you're going, you know, Councilmember Byrd. I would highly, highly, highly advise council to not make a condition that a third party approves another party's.
No, that's not.
I wasn't sure if you're going there. I
That wasn't
just wanted to be clear about, because I've received that phone call from other people in the community saying, well, just let Perigo approve it. I'm like,
Yeah, no, that's.
it's not the way the world
that's
works.
Approval process.
No.
Yeah.
But at least, if we had that, we could say, we
Yeah.
have the plan, we have a plan, we understand that.
And once it's submitted to me, it becomes public record. In preparation for this meeting, once we develop our report, you know, I emailed the packet to Summers, Mr. Summers back there. I told him what pages the report was on. So he had full information. I've been in communication with the applicant and the applicant's consultant over the past week and a half. So I would say transparency has been there.
That's great.
We may not be very all supportive of what's been submitted. It may not check all the boxes. But it does, in my opinion, satisfy, you know, where we're going and what our past practice has been with special use permits in the city of Allegan.
I concur. So could we get a motion, please, to approve the special use permit for a marijuana growing facility at 845 Industrial Drive? And if you want to add conditions, you can do so.
So moved.
Did you want to add the condition of the maintenance plan?
Didn't we just say that
The
we
actual
got that?
plan.
Oh, the actual plan. So, yeah, sure, with the contingent that we'd like to see a copy of the maintenance plan.
So,
Joel, can you repeat that back?
yeah, I just want to make sure just for record keeping. I want to make sure, just for record keeping, the motion is by Councilmember Byrd that you approve the special use permit with the condition that a preventive and maintenance plan be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
That sounds great, yes.
As well as the conditions that were specified by planning.
Yes.
Could I get a support, please?
Support.
It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion, council?
I just want to say, I really don't want to be a no vote here. I'm concerned that we don't have everything, I mean, we don't have staff approvals in front of us. I'm just not seeing the kind of information I would expect for something like this right now at this
Okay.
stage.
Thanks,
And I'm
Dave.
nervous about that for the process.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
Motion carries 6-1. Next, we have 11F.2, which is a request by Summit Labs to approve the division of 51-253-022-00 and Lot 22 of the Allegan Industrial Plat No. 1.
All right.
Staff?
Per your code of ordinances, city council is the body that approves all lot splits. or lot combinations in the city of Allegan. This is a lot split in the city of Allegan, and this is really an example of two neighbors being cooperative to support economic and industrial growth in the industrial park. So Summit Labs, which is the building on the right side of your screen and owns the whole parcel outlined in blue, has been working with FC&A, which is a metal fabricator, is the term I would use, located across, I believe that's Airway Drive or Industrial Drive on the other side. Which one is it? I think it's industrial. Airway's on the other side where DPW garage is. So FC&A needs to expand. They've been expanding, but they have no more land to expand on their site. So they approached Summit Labs. They would love to stay in the city of Allegan. The ownership structure is all from the Kalamazoo area. So Summit Labs being able to work with them to allow them to expand in Allegan is a big win for us as a community. Once this lot split is approved, FC&A will approach the Planning Commission with a site plan review application to begin construction at this site. It is recommended you approve this lot split.
Thank you, Joel. Council, did you have any questions for staff? Seeing no questions, could I get a motion to approve the division, please?
So moved.
It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion, council? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Abstain.
6 yeas, 1 abstention. Next, we have 11F.3, which is a request to authorize the City of Allegan to enter a license agreement with the owner of 321 Ely Street. Staff?
Yes, very quickly, the owner of this property is looking to replace her fence that you can see on the screen outlined in red. That is also the extent of our right-of-way along Ely Street. That's not Ely Street.
Is it James?
Yeah, it is.
Or that was mentioned in the
Yeah,
report?
and it says Ely Street in the license agreement given to us by our city attorney at the very top, but it says James all the way through. So we're gonna make an amendment to this and have it be 321 James Street.
Is their address actually Ely, though, but that's on James Street?
I'm gonna look that up real quick if you don't mind. I just wanna make sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
One James is nowhere near Ely, so.
Yeah, we are probably correct right now, but I'm just making sure if that's all right. Yep, that's 321 Ely, so my apologies for being thrown a loop there for a second. So, replacing the fence, she applied for a fence permit through PCI. PCI said, we can give you a fence permit for your rear property, however, your existing fence along James Street is in the right-of-way, and we cannot issue a permit in the right-of-way. So her builder reached out to me and said, how can we make this work? I checked with Nick Curcio. Nick and I agree that a license agreement is the way to make this work. So we're asking city council to approve a license agreement for this individual to have the fence, the private sidewalk, and as you zoom in, you can see the porch steps in our right-of-way. They have to be maintained in good condition, and we will hold the right to, go in there and fix them if they're not in good condition. It's a pretty straightforward agreement to help a homeowner out.
Thank you, Joel. Apart from where this home actually is, does anyone have any questions for staff? Kidding.
Just a real comment. I'm off my.
Combobulated.
Messed you up, didn't I? Sorry, man.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, could we get a motion, please, to authorize the City of Allegan to enter into the license agreement with the owner of 321 Ely? Thank you, Bill. Could I get a support?
Support.
It has been moved and supported. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next, we are at agenda item 13, which is the communications from city manager, council, and the mayor. Staff, anything tonight?
All right, just real quick to remind council, as discussed during the study session, we are meeting this Wednesday at 5:30 for the first review of our budget meetings. The draft budget was emailed to council this evening. We should have printed copies for you. Wednesday night. If you do not want a printed copy, please email me and let me know, and we will save the paper and the ink.
I don't want.
That is all
Thank
I
you.
have.
Thanks, Joel. Anybody else? Staff, Parker, Michaela, Doug?
My thumb drive.
Thank you. Bill, did you have anything tonight?
I do not.
Dave, anything from you?
No.
Roger? Teresa?
No.
Peter?
No.
Mike? I don't have anything either. So it is 8:26. We'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you all.